When the hands freeze, a tale of time and death. In a quiet facility for the terminally ill, time doesn't just pass, it stops. These aren't just any clocks. Each one is a unique, handcrafted timepiece, and they all have one thing in common. They freeze at the precise moment a patient dies. A strange coincidence? That's what I thought, too. But my investigation uncovered something far more sinister. This isn't a memorial. It's a machine, powered by death itself, and it's at the heart of a terrifying local legend. Now, I want to be clear from the start. The story you're about to hear is a work of fiction. St. Jude's Hospice, the clocks, the people, none of it is real. But it's a story that sinks its teeth into a very real piece of folklore, and it's one that deserves to be told. Welcome to Sleepy Echoes Unwind, where the night remembers old stories. Light your lanterns, slow your breathing, and let the dark settle in. Chapter 1. The Anomaly at St. Jude's. It all starts with a whisper, an urban legend traded on internet forums and in the hushed conversations of a sleepy, forgotten town. They talk about a place called St. Jude's Hospice, nestled in a quiet corner where people go to find their final moments of peace. But what makes St. Jude's the subject of so much speculation isn't how people live there, it's how they die. Along the walls of the main hall and in the patients' rooms hang dozens of clocks, and no two are alike. There are grand pendulum clocks that must have once stood in stately homes, ornate mantel clocks with gilded angels, and simple wooden-cased timepieces. There are no digital displays here. It's a world of gears and hands. And one by one, over decades, they've all stopped. The story goes that whenever a patient passes away, one of the clocks in the building stops, its hands frozen on the exact minute and second of their death. Not close to the time, not a few minutes off, exactly. Hello, listener. My name is Julian Croft. I'm an investigative reporter, and I specialize in the strange and the unexplained, the stories that hide in the shadows of conventional truth. When I first heard about the clocks of St. Jude's, my journalistic instincts screamed hoax. It's a well-known piece of folklore that clocks sometimes stop when their owners die. This is usually chalked up to confirmation bias, or the very real tradition of manually stopping a clock as a sign of respect, or to mark the time of death. The idea is more of a poetic metaphor for a life ending than some verifiable event. But the claims about St. Jude's were different. The sheer volume, over 100 stopped clocks, they said, and the supposed precision of it all went far beyond simple coincidence or tradition. This wasn't a one-off story about a grandfather clock stopping the day Grandpa died. This felt like a pattern, a system. I had to see it for myself. My investigation started, as it so often does, with a drive into the heart of a story that shouldn't exist. Chapter 2. The Silent Hall. Getting inside St. Jude's was easier than I expected. They were used to visitors, though it seemed few came to see the clocks. I introduced myself as a journalist, writing a piece on unique palliative care methods, which wasn't entirely a lie. The director, a man named Alistair Finch, was a gaunt figure with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of every soul that had passed through his facility. He was polite but reserved, choosing his words with care. He led me to the main hall, and there they were. It was an astonishing sight. Dozens upon dozens of clocks, a silent horological graveyard, lined the long, quiet corridor. Each one was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, and each one was perfectly still. Their hands were a frozen cacophony of final moments. 11:42, 3:17, 9:03. Some were covered in a thin layer of dust, their silence decades old. Others looked as if they had stopped only yesterday. "A touching tribute," I offered, just to test the waters. Finch gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Each patient is unique. Their final moment is their own. We like to acknowledge that." I pointed to a particularly intricate clock, its pendulum shaped like a silver feather, stopped at 2:22. "And these just stop on their own? Mechanical failure at the precise moment of death? Over 100 times?" A thin smile crossed his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's a local phenomenon, an old story. We don't question it. We just see it as a small, strange comfort." But this wasn't comfort. It was a statistical impossibility. The numbers just didn't add up. My next stop was a former nurse who'd worked at St. Jude's for over 20 years. She agreed to speak with me, but only anonymously, and far from the hospice grounds. "We were told not to talk about it," she said, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. "Finch said it was a private matter, part of the hospice's character. But it was more than that. It was unsettling. We'd hear a patient had passed, and then, a few minutes later, one of us would notice it. Another clock in the hall had gone silent. Always. Without fail." She's the one who told me that all the clocks came from the same place. A long, closed workshop on the edge of town. A place that, according to local legend, had a dark history of its own. It was the workshop of a man named Elias Thorne. And with that name, I wasn't just investigating a curiosity anymore. I was uncovering a legend. Chapter 3. The Legend of Elias Thorne. The name Elias Thorne wasn't in any official town records, but it was woven deep into the local folklore. The story goes that Thorne was a master clockmaker in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He was a recluse, a genius whose creations were said to be more than just machines. They said he didn't just build clocks, he gave them a soul. Finding his workshop was a challenge. It was a dilapidated building at the end of a dirt road, being slowly reclaimed by ivy and time. The door was unlocked. Inside, it was like stepping into a frozen moment. Half-finished clocks lay on workbenches, covered in a thick shroud of dust. Gears and springs were scattered like metallic bones. It was in a back room, hidden beneath a rotten floorboard, that I found it. The Thorne Journal. The script inside was elegant but frantic. Elias Thorne wasn't just a clockmaker. He was a self-proclaimed student of chronometric harmonics and sympathetic resonance, fields of study that don't actually exist. He believed that strong emotional events, particularly the final, potent energy released at the moment of death, created a resonance, a wave that could be captured. His early entries were filled with theories and diagrams of escapement mechanisms and pendulums designed not just to keep time, but to listen to it. He wrote, "The world is full of echoes. A life lived is a vibration in the fabric of existence. The final moment, the cessation of that vibration, is the loudest echo of all. A conventional clock merely tracks the river of time. I will build one that can feel the ripples." But as I read on, the entries grew darker. Thorne wasn't just observing these ripples. He believed he could harness them. He wrote of a focal instrument, a master clock that could synchronize with his other creations. His theory was that when one of his specially crafted clocks was near a death, its mechanism would resonate with the finality of that moment and stop. This act, however, wasn't passive. He called it chronometric siphoning. The stopped clock didn't just mark the moment, it absorbed it. It drew that final spark of energy into itself and transferred it, through some unseen network, back to the focal instrument. The last page of the journal held a frantic, terrifying sketch. a monstrous, complex clock. Below it was a single, chilling sentence. It must be fed. The town's prosperity depends on it. Chapter 4. The Revelation. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying certainty. St. Jude's Hospice wasn't chosen by chance. It was the harvest field. The terminally ill were not just patients. They were the unwitting fuel for a machine that fed on their final seconds. St. Jude, after all, is the patron saint of lost causes and desperate situations. I went back to the hospice, the journal heavy in my bag. I found Mr. Finch in his office, where a single ornate clock was ticking softly on his desk. It was the only working clock I had seen in the entire building. I laid the journal on his desk. He didn't even look surprised. He just sighed, a long, weary sound. "I wondered if someone would piece it together one day," he said. "The Thorne family pact is a burden my family has carried for generations." "This is monstrous," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You're using these people." "Using them?" Finch's expression hardened. "Every patient here receives the best care imaginable. They are comfortable. They are at peace. Their passing is gentle. What happens in their final second is a price that has been paid for a century of this town's peace and prosperity. No major accidents, no economic collapses, no tragedies." He explained the rest. The focal instrument was hidden deep beneath the town hall, a massive, ticking heart powered by the collected moments of death. The clock on his desk was linked to it, a monitor of the system's health. The pact demanded that Thorne's clocks be present at every death in town, but placing them in a hospice was simply more efficient. Elias Thorne believed he was creating balance, Finch continued, his voice devoid of emotion. He wasn't a monster. He saw an energy that was simply dissipating into the ether, and he found a way to use it, to turn the certainty of death into the stability of life for the many. I looked from Finch to the ticking clock on his desk, and then thought of the silent hall of frozen moments, each one representing a life, now reduced to a gear in a machine that powered a legend. The reporter in me had the story of a lifetime, but the human in me was staring into an abyss. "I have a question, listener." Finch knew I couldn't expose him. To do so would mean unraveling the very fabric of the town, testing a century-old legend, and risking whatever malevolent force, or simple chaos, Thorne's machine was holding at bay. So, what would you do? If you discovered a secret like this, would you expose the horrifying truth for the sake of justice? Or would you protect the peaceful lives of thousands built on a foundation of harvested seconds? Let me know in the comments below. The conclusion. I left St. Jude's and never wrote the story. The truth was too complex, the consequences too unknowable. The legend of Elias Thorne, Mr. Finch, and St. Jude's Hospice remains just that, a ghost story whispered in the quiet corners of a town that is just a little too peaceful, a little too lucky. I'm left with the burden of this knowledge, changed by an investigation that led me to the place where time itself is currency. The clocks at St. Jude's remain silent, each one a monument to a final breath. They stand as a testament to a terrifying system, a reminder that some legends are born from truths we aren't meant to understand. And somewhere, deep beneath the town, a great clock continues to tick, fed by the seconds that were never meant to be saved. The question that haunts me isn't whether the clocks will ever start again, but what will happen on the day they finally run out of time. Thank you for joining this moonlit journey. If you'd like to unwind with more tales each week, light your lantern and subscribe. For now, blow out your lantern. We shall meet again.